It was the kind of summer morning that lived in scrapbooks. Blue skies, distant bird calls, the earthy scent of pine needles warmed by the sun. On July 12th, 2002, Camp Echo Pines, nestled deep in the backwoods of Oregon's Deschutes National Forest, buzzed with life. Children between the ages of 8 and 13 darted between canoes, art cabins, and hiking trails, each absorbed in their own little world of adventure. Among them was 10-year-old Daniel Wexler, freckled, soft-spoken, and sharp-eyed. He had arrived at camp just 5 days earlier. To most of the other kids, Daniel was polite but quiet, the kind of boy who watched more than he spoke. He had an old soul, his parents often said, the sort who noticed the details other people missed. His bunkmate, Kyle Harlow, remembered Daniel that morning with striking clarity. He was folding his clothes, Kyle would later tell authorities. Not like a kid, like a grown-up. He folded his socks together. Who does that at camp? Daniel's counselor, Evan Morales, remembered something else. He asked me about the stars, he said in a deposition years later. Said he read that stars don't really twinkle, it's the atmosphere. He was a thinker, that kid. But sometime between 9:45 a.m. and 10:15 a.m., Daniel Wexler vanished. It wasn't immediate. The camp staff thought he was just late returning from the nature trail behind the East Ridge. But when the lunch bell rang and his seat remained empty, alarm bells started to go off. They fanned out, counselors, older campers, even the kitchen staff, all calling his name. "Daniel!" They shouted into the woods, their voices bouncing off tree trunks and echoing into silence. Nothing. By 1:20 p.m., the local sheriff's office was contacted, and by 3 p.m., the Deschutes County Search and Rescue Team had arrived, armed with tracking dogs, heat-sensing drones, and maps of the surrounding area. The camp was locked down. Parents were called. One by one, children were pulled aside and questioned. Did anyone see Daniel leave the trail? Did he say anything strange? Did anyone follow him? The forest was combed for 3 full days. Helicopters circled. Rangers on horseback plunged deep into ravines. They found his trail for a while. Small boot prints beside a dry creek bed, a candy wrapper snagged on a bush, and then nothing, as if the trees had swallowed him whole. For Daniel's parents, Claire and Mitch Wexler, time twisted and broke apart. "We drove 6 hours without speaking," Claire recalled in a later interview. "Just silence. I remember looking out the window and thinking, if I don't scream, I might explode." She didn't explode. She collapsed. The moment they showed her Daniel's neatly made bed, his name tag still pinned to the side of the bunk. The camp was shut down for the remainder of the summer. Investigators set up a base in one of the dining halls. Tips poured in. Sightings from nearby towns, theories about runaways, rumors of strange figures seen lurking near the trailhead. None of them led anywhere. And yet, the mystery deepened. A ranger named Melanie Groves, who had worked the forest for 17 years, said something that still echoes in reports today. "It's like he went up," she said. "Not left, not right, not into the ravine, just up. Gone." By late August 2002, with no body, no belongings, no new clues, the case was downgraded. The official designation? Missing, suspicious circumstances. But Claire Wexler would never accept that. "My son didn't wander off," she told a reporter at the time. "He didn't just disappear. Someone took him. Or something happened out there we don't understand." Theories spread quickly. Some believed he'd been abducted, that someone had used the camp's remote location as cover. Others whispered about hidden caves, deep sinkholes, or animal attacks. A few even suggested Daniel had planned to disappear, referencing a strange drawing found in his sketchbook of a tower, a forest, and a series of dots that looked eerily like Morse code. But for Kyle, his old bunkmate, none of it made sense. "He was just a kid," he said in a podcast interview years later. "We were going to play tetherball after lunch." The final confirmed sighting came from a fellow camper named Grace Dupree, who said she saw Daniel standing at the base of Old Cedar Hill, a clearing about half a mile from the trail. "He was looking up," she said, "like he saw something in the trees." When they took her back days later, she pointed to the same spot. But there was nothing there, just wind. Years passed. Camp Echo Pines was sold to a private developer and closed off to the public. The forest grew thicker. Daniel's story became a cautionary tale, one of those whispered among camp counselors, the kind you're not sure is real or just meant to scare kids into staying close to the group. But his mother kept looking. Claire filed FOIA requests. She hired private investigators. She spoke at missing persons conferences, visited psychics, wrote letters to lawmakers, to God, to anyone who would listen. And then, silence, just like the day Daniel vanished. Until, 21 years later, in the summer of 2023, a drone operator named Elijah James was surveying the forest for a university wildlife study. As his drone passed over a stretch of restricted woodland, land closed off after wildfires a decade earlier, something caught his eye. At first it looked like a pattern in the rocks, but then the drone rose higher. That's when he saw it. 5 letters, cleanly arranged. HELP. He thought it was a prank. But something about it felt too precise, too old. He marked the coordinates, saved the video, and then called the sheriff. What they would find buried beneath those trees would reignite a mystery, long buried, pull at wounds, long scabbed over, and force a grieving family to once again face the shadows of a forest that had never stopped whispering Daniel's name. The news of Daniel Wexler's disappearance spread like wildfire through Bend and then across Oregon, then the country. Atizeves fiu eltunt niom nelkul egi felugielt nyari taborbol, es nem shak meglepet embereket, hanem megijestete oket. Because if Daniel could vanish, then so could anyone's child. The FBI joined the search within 48 hours. Helicopters were rerouted from wildfire patrol to scan the forest. Dogs tracked and circled, but never zeroed in. By the 5th day, media vans lined the dirt road leading to Camp Echo Pines, reporters filing live updates against a backdrop of wind-blown trees and tired search teams. One of the most haunting images broadcast that week was Claire Wexler, standing alone at the tree line, holding her son's blue sweatshirt to her face. "He was wearing this the night before," she told a reporter from Channel 6. "I thought it smelled like campfire. Now I hold it, and all I can think is, did he get cold out there?" Her husband, Mitch, stood next to her, arms crossed tightly. He didn't speak much to the media, but when he did, it was clipped and angry. "Someone knows what happened," he said. "Someone saw something, and if they don't come forward, I swear to God I will find out anyway." But the trail was already ice cold. Camp Echo Pines was scanned, measured, dissected. Staff were interviewed. A few inconsistencies emerged, like the fact that one counselor clocked out early that morning for a phone call and couldn't account for 30 minutes. Another, a 19-year-old named Derek, had been seen sneaking off to smoke near the South Ridge. But nothing directly tied them to Daniel's disappearance. The camp itself was rustic, but not unsafe. It had operated since 1977 without incident, and no other campers had ever gone missing. But the woods surrounding it? That was another story. Old ranger reports revealed animal sightings in the area. Black bears, cougars, even occasional reports of a rogue coyote pack. But attacks on humans were rare. And there was no blood, no scraps of clothing, no sign of a struggle. One theory, put forth by Sheriff Carson Reed during a press conference, was that Daniel got lost trying to return from the lookout point, a rocky ledge about 0.8 miles from the camp, and fell into one of the many hidden ravines or forest sinkholes. But Daniel was wearing a bright red jacket that day, and the area had been scanned by thermal drones and FLIR-equipped helicopters. They found deer, birds, even buried wildlife remains. But no Daniel. The local paper, the Deschutes Eagle, ran a controversial editorial titled "A Hole in the Forest," suggesting that perhaps the region itself was to blame. A dark zone where strange things happened. It mentioned a few other incidents over the years: hikers gone missing, a hunter who claimed to see lights in the trees, even a 1989 report of campers hearing a child crying in the night near the river, though no children had been registered there. By late August, coverage dwindled. The search was formally suspended. Posters began curling on telephone poles. The Wexlers returned to their home in Eugene with only a box of Daniel's belongings: his sketchbook, a plastic flashlight, and a green backpack with his initials stitched in gold thread. For months, Claire sat in Daniel's room every night. She left the light on. Sometimes she'd write letters to him, folded and tucked into the pages of his favorite books. "If you're out there," she once wrote, "and you come back, we'll go to Crater Lake. You always wanted to go. We'll go. I promise." The family refused to move. They refused to change his room. And every July 12th, for 21 straight years, Claire walked into the forest near where the camp used to be, and left a single balloon tied to the base of an old cedar tree. But behind closed doors, the strain became unbearable. Mitch Wexler, once a calm and solid father, grew distant. He stopped shaving, stopped working, and eventually moved into the garage for space. 2 years later, the couple quietly separated. It wasn't hate, Claire told a documentarian years later. It was too much love, too much pain. We each carried half of it, and neither of us could carry the other anymore. Online forums dedicated to missing persons kept Daniel's story alive. One Reddit thread titled "The Boy Who Wasn't There" gained thousands of followers, each with their own theory, from government cover-ups to Bigfoot to secret military tunnels under the forest. But for Claire, it was never about theories. "I just want to know," she said during a candlelight vigil in 2012. "Even if it's bad, even if it breaks me, I just want to know." In 2015, a tip came in. A hiker claimed to have found what looked like a child's shoe near a long-forgotten trail. The shoe was recovered, but it didn't match Daniel's size or the make of his hiking boots. It belonged to another child, part of a different missing persons case from 1997, unresolved. By 2020, almost no one but the family remembered Daniel Wexler. Camp Echo Pines was long gone, its cabins collapsed, reclaimed by moss and root. The land had been sold to the state and fenced off due to wildfire hazards and wildlife protection orders. Trespassing was strictly prohibited, but one person never forgot: Claire. She spent 2 decades collecting every scrap, every report, every tip. Her office at home was a shrine of maps, newspaper clippings, and photographs. One wall was completely dedicated to satellite images of the forest, updated yearly, most blurry or low-res. She circled odd clearings, dotted lines where fire breaks had been cut. She had even tried contacting satellite companies directly to request higher-quality imagery, but no one took her seriously until 2023. Until a grad student with a drone caught something no one else had seen in 2 decades, something hidden, out of sight to the naked eye. The word "help" made of stones, set in perfect alignment, only visible from the sky. The shape and placement were too deliberate, too human, but the rocks were faded, weathered. They had been there a long time. When Claire saw the footage, she didn't speak. She only stared. Then she whispered, "He was trying." By the fall of 2002, the missing posters were starting to come down. The local police had no new leads, No witness stepped forward. The physical search was called off, and Daniel Wexler's name, once spoken in every house across the county, began to fade into the margins of unsolved lists and cold case bulletins. But the Wexler family refused to let it go cold. That September, Claire and Mitch hired private investigator Raymond Ortiz, a former Portland homicide detective who had a reputation for uncovering what law enforcement missed. He arrived with thick boots, a tape recorder, and a battered leather notebook. Ortiz began with the basics. He retraced Daniel's last known movements. He re-interviewed camp counselors, comparing transcripts against original police reports. There were inconsistencies, he later told the Oregon Journal. Small ones, but enough to make me question the sequence of that morning. For instance, Counselor Evan Morales initially said he saw Daniel after breakfast walking toward the Craft cabin, but later changed his story, saying he saw him near the trail leading to Old Cedar Hill. When pressed, Morales said, "I guess I was confused." It was chaotic that day. Then there was Derek, the 19-year-old counselor who left the campgrounds briefly that morning. Ortiz discovered Derek had a record, a juvenile assault charge sealed due to his age. When asked about it in 2002, he denied any criminal history. But the report wasn't dug up until Ortiz requested deeper records through a legal loophole. Still, nothing linked Derek, or anyone, directly to Daniel. Theories multiplied. One theory was that Daniel had suffered an accident, possibly a fall into a sinkhole or cave. Oregon's forests were riddled with lava tubes and fissures, and one ranger speculated that if Daniel fell into one, we might never find him. Another theory took root online, that Daniel had been abducted not by a stranger, but by someone at the camp. In 2004, Ortiz pursued a possible connection to a local groundskeeper who had been dismissed quietly from the camp in 1999 after an inappropriate comment made toward a camper. That man, Gerald Hensley, had been living off-grid in a trailer 40 miles from Echo Pines. Ortiz and the sheriff's department visited him. He denied ever knowing Daniel and had an alibi. He was seen at a local diner that morning, verified by 2 waitresses. In 2005, Daniel's case was briefly revived after a motorist in eastern Idaho claimed he picked up a hitchhiking boy who matched his description. "He had these dark eyes," the man said, "and he didn't talk much. I dropped him off near the Montana border. Something about him stuck with me." Authorities reviewed highway footage, searched for matching individuals, and even worked with forensic artists to age Daniel's photo and distribute it along that route. But the tip fizzled out. There was no record of the boy ever surfacing again. Meanwhile, Claire Wexler became a name within the missing persons advocacy community. She helped launch a foundation, Daniel's Light, which offered resources to families of missing children, particularly those from rural areas with underfunded law enforcement support. But her focus remained on one thing: keeping her son's case alive. She launched a website, finddanielwexler.org, which included case details, scanned documents, maps, and a tip submission form. At its peak, the site received over 10,000 monthly visitors. People from around the world submitted sightings, ideas, and theories. Some were earnest, others cruel hoaxes. In 2008, an anonymous email came in through the site. "He's still in the woods, but not where you think. Look up." Investigators traced the IP address to a library in Vancouver. Security footage showed no clear suspect, just a blurry figure in a hoodie at a public workstation. Ortiz believed it was a prank. Claire wasn't so sure. "Look up," she kept repeating. Why did they say, "Look up"? In 2010, Ortiz retired. The Wexlers hired a new investigator, a former FBI analyst named Serena Doyle. She introduced data modeling to the search. overlaying GPS data from search teams, plotting camper movement patterns, and mapping psychological escape behavior in children. Her conclusion? If Daniel was trying to hide or signal, he likely would have chosen elevation. Children often seek high ground in panic situations. The rocks, the ridge. It fits, but there was a problem. The area Doyle believed Daniel would have gone to had been sealed off since 2011 due to wildfire damage. Access was restricted by the State Forestry Department, and drones were not permitted under old fire watch regulations. Claire filed multiple requests to enter. All were denied. Meanwhile, the emotional toll continued to tear at the Wexler family. Mitch moved away in 2012 and started a new life in Arizona. He eventually remarried, something Claire didn't resent, but didn't understand either. "People grieve differently," she once said in a podcast. "Some people survive by starting over. I survive by staying." Daniel's childhood friends grew up. Kyle Harlow, his old bunkmate, wrote a song called "Trees Don't Talk," a haunting acoustic track about guilt, memory, and silence. It went viral on YouTube and brought renewed attention to the case. That same year, 2016, a small investigative team from a local news station ran a 3-part series revisiting the disappearance. They brought in cadaver dogs to a section of forest near the old campsite. One dog alerted, once, at the base of a large pine tree, but soil samples showed nothing. No bones, no DNA. "We were always chasing ghosts," said one search team member. "But sometimes I think the ghost was chasing us." Every year, on the anniversary of Daniel's disappearance, Claire would post the same message to her foundation's social media account. "To the boy who made me a mother, if you're still out there, keep holding on. We are still looking, and we will never stop." Then came 2020. The world shut down. The pandemic halted all investigations. Claire fell ill with COVID-19 and spent weeks recovering. Her office sat untouched, her laptop unopened. For the first time in nearly 20 years, she missed her July 12th trip to the forest. She felt guilt, heavy, suffocating guilt. "I felt like I'd broken a promise," she said later. "If he had left that message, if he was still trying, and I wasn't there, what if that was the 1 year he needed me?" By 2022, almost no official investigative resources were allocated to Daniel's case. But fate has a strange sense of timing. Because just 1 year later, in the heat of July 2023, a PhD student from Oregon State University, Elijah James, flew a drone over a section of restricted forest for a biodiversity study and saw something no one else had. Something hidden by trees, forgotten by time, preserved by hope. 5 letters, carved not in wood or dirt, but shaped by human hands, arranged in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. HELP. Not fresh, not recent, weather-worn, discolored, sun-bleached, old. Old enough to have been there in 2002. The message in the rocks was like a pulse from the past. Faint, forgotten, but alive. It reached across 2 decades of static, breaking through the fog of memory and media silence. Elijah James, the doctoral student who discovered it, was reviewing footage late at night in his campus lab. He had no idea what he'd found. His research had nothing to do with missing persons. He was mapping the habitat patterns of gray foxes. But something about the unnatural symmetry in that clearing stopped him cold. The rocks were arranged in perfect lines, too geometric to be natural. And the word they spelled, help, was clear, but only visible at a specific altitude. Trees had grown taller around the message over the years, partially obscuring it. Elijah marked the GPS coordinates and sent a copy of the footage to his professor. But what really changed everything was a random Reddit post. July 14th, 2023. Username PineFox42 posted, Doing drone work for a fox study in Deschutes National Forest, found this creepy rock pattern that spells help. Anyone know the backstory? Coordinates blurred for now. Just curious? It blew up overnight. Someone in the comments asked, "Is this near the old Camp Echo Pines?" And then someone else replied with a name, Daniel Wexler. Within 48 hours, a wave of amateur sleuths, missing persons advocates, and journalists descended on the thread. Claire Wexler was sent screenshots by a volunteer from her foundation. She didn't say a word. She simply got in her car, drove 6 hours, and waited in the Deschutes County Sheriff's parking lot before the doors even opened. When Sheriff Calvin Brooks reviewed the footage, he immediately knew it had to be taken seriously. The case was reopened. A team was assembled: forensic archaeologists, crime scene analysts, canine handlers, and drone pilots with higher resolution gear. A warrant was quickly granted to access the restricted forest zone. The help message was found exactly where the footage had captured it, nearly 2.1 miles southeast of the original search radius. There was a strange solemnity in the way they approached it. Investigators moved in silence. The clearing was cordoned off. Drones hovered overhead. Every stone in the message was photographed, catalogued, and moved. Then came the ground-penetrating radar. That's when they found the items buried just beyond the word, 6 inches beneath the surface, a small, heavily weathered flashlight. Rusted. The rubber grip eroded. Next to it, a notebook. Molded, stiff with decay, but still intact. Inside were pages filled with fading words, written in a child's hand. They could only read parts. "I can't hear them anymore. I waited by the tree like she said. No food. Day 4. If Mom reads this, I love you. I don't know what happened. They didn't come. I thought they would. I tried the rocks. Maybe someone will see. Still here. Still trying." Claire collapsed when she saw the scanned pages. She ran her fingers over her son's handwriting, now stained with time, the pencil faint but still visible. "He was alive," she whispered. "He was alive for days." It changed everything. The timeline was wrong. The search zones had been wrong. Everything had been off by just enough to miss him, and yet just close enough that they almost found him. Search logs were reanalyzed. A portion of the forest, once thought to be inaccessible due to a rockfall in 2001, had been incorrectly mapped in the GPS models used during the original investigation. Daniel had made it there, possibly in search of higher ground, maybe even trying to signal aircraft. One of the messages in the notebook read, "I think I walked in circles. I saw the tree twice, the big one with the black line, but I still can't find camp." Investigators believe Daniel was disoriented. Whether he'd gotten lost or wandered off after seeing something, an animal, a person, a noise, remains unknown. But his direction had taken him out of the planned search grid, deeper into the forest where visibility was low and access difficult. He had tried to survive. He had tried to send a message, and no one saw it, until 21 years later. The emotional fallout was immediate. The Wexler family, fragmented by years of loss, reunited for the first time since Mitch had moved to Arizona. He flew in within 12 hours of the discovery and met Claire at the site. There were no words between them at first, only a long, shaking embrace, a moment suspended in silence. The media returned with a vengeance. News vans once again lined the access roads, satellite trucks, reporters, camera drones. But Claire had changed. She didn't want the story told as a mystery solved. "No," she told a press conference, "this isn't closure. This is evidence that he tried, that he fought, that he waited for us, and that we didn't find him in time." The remaining pages of Daniel's notebook were sent to a preservation lab. Experts believe he survived between 5 and 7 days after the disappearance. Weather data from July 2002 confirms moderate conditions during that time. No rain, daytime temperatures in the 70s, but no food, no water, no help, no answer to his message. In a rare public statement, Sheriff Brooks said, "This discovery is a tragedy, not a triumph. The investigation will remain open, not because we expect someone to be charged, but because this is no longer just a missing persons case. This is a search for truth." And then, slowly, the world quieted again. The forest, once pulsing with the noise of helicopters, dogs, and search teams, returned to its stillness. But the message, the rocks, the notebook, the pencil marks, endured. And for those who had followed the case, something deeper shifted. No longer was Daniel Wexler just a name on a poster. He was a boy who used the last of his strength to speak into the sky. A child who spelled out the most primal cry, help, with stones and hope, in a place where no one could hear him. Until someone finally did, the clearing had become sacred ground. In the weeks that followed the drone discovery, the forest where Daniel Wexler's final message was found transformed from a forgotten patch of earth to a forensic shrine. Yellow tape rippled through the trees. Dozens of experts combed every inch of the surrounding acre with a precision unmatched even in the original 2002 search. But the most surprising revelation came not from the soil, but from the sky. New aerial scans revealed that the help message wasn't the only pattern in the rocks. Roughly 40 yards north of the main clearing, under a dense canopy of cedar, they found something else. A small circle of cleared ground, perfectly round, with 4 lines of rock radiating out from the center like spokes on a wheel. Most of it had been covered by years of leaf litter and fallen limbs, but infrared imagery picked up the temperature differences in the soil where the rocks had once been exposed to sunlight. It was deliberate, intentional, constructed, but no one could explain what it meant. Some theorized it was a makeshift compass. Maybe Daniel had tried to mark the direction of the sun or his orientation. Others believed it may have been symbolic, a last act of organization in a world that had become chaos for him. Either way, the discovery reframed the boy entirely. Daniel wasn't just lost. He was thinking, planning, mapping, trying, and still no one came. Forensic teams also discovered evidence of shelter, a shallow pit lined with moss and bark, large enough for a child to lie in. DNA swabs confirmed trace matches to Daniel's hair, likely transferred from his sweatshirt. Around the pit were tiny shreds of fabric, blue and red, possibly from his jacket. Most had disintegrated into strands after years of exposure. But the biggest revelation came in August, when analysts finally decoded the writing inside Daniel's notebook. Though most of the pages were weather-damaged, one sequence stood out. On the inside of the back cover, written in extremely small pencil strokes, was a block of letters and slashes, nearly illegible to the naked eye. At first, investigators thought it was gibberish, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was Morse code. Claire Wexler had suspected as much. "Daniel was obsessed with codes," she told reporters. "He used to leave little notes for me in code when I packed his lunch. Once he wrote 'I love you' on a banana peel using tiny dots with a pen. With the help of former NSA cryptography consultant Jonah Pierce, the note was painstakingly reconstructed. Went to tree, saw her, followed, she said come, got dark, lost, tried go back, hill too steep, tired, hungry, sorry mom, I tried." The word her was immediately flagged by investigators. Who was she? Could Daniel have seen someone in the woods? A camper? A woman? A hallucination? Had someone led him away? For the first time in over 2 decades, the possibility of an outside party, someone who interacted with Daniel, was seriously considered again. Investigators reopened old witness statements. Grace Dupree, the girl who had last seen Daniel near Old Cedar Hill, was re-interviewed. Now in her 30s, she offered more clarity than she could at age 10. "I remember thinking he was talking to someone," she said. "I didn't see anyone else, but he was looking up the hill. I remember because he waved, not at me, upward, like someone was ahead of him. Could Daniel have followed another camper, a staff member, someone unauthorized?" Detectives returned to the 2002 camp roster. One name stood out. A junior counselor listed as Anna P. No last name. Further digging revealed her full identity: Anna Pearden. She was 17 at the time and had worked only 1 week before leaving the camp early due to a family emergency. That phrase, family emergency, appeared in her file, but there was no formal resignation letter, no follow-up, and oddly, no record of her next of kin. In fact, the background check on her was missing from the archived HR documents entirely. When contacted in 2023, Anna, now living under a married name in Spokane, was reluctant to speak. After initial resistance, she agreed to a private interview. Anna admitted something shocking. She had been reprimanded by a senior counselor the night before Daniel vanished. "Daniel came to the cabin late," she said. "He was scared. He said someone had knocked on the window. I told him it was probably nothing, wind, animals, whatever. But he looked me in the eye and said, 'She told me to follow tomorrow.' She said she brushed it off at the time, thought he was just dreaming, but the next morning, when she learned he was gone, she panicked. She didn't want to be blamed, so she said nothing. And 2 days later, she asked to leave. 'I didn't know,' she sobbed in the interview. 'I didn't know it was real. I didn't think he meant it. I was 17. Anna wasn't a suspect, at least not in the traditional sense, but her revelation reopened a terrifying possibility: that someone had lured Daniel away, whether it was a person he trusted or someone pretending to be one. Even Claire couldn't rule it out. "There were things he wrote that I didn't understand," she said of the notebook. She said, come. Why didn't he name her? Experts believe Daniel may have been disoriented, sleep-deprived, possibly hallucinating. Children lost in the wilderness often experience vivid dreams, imagined voices, or even rescuers that aren't there. But the ambiguity remains. Was it a hallucination, or a person who was never found? And if someone lured Daniel into that part of the woods, where did they go? Investigators revisited security footage from 2002, but most of it had degraded or been recorded over. Nothing useful remained. In one final act of hope, the FBI created a 3D reconstruction of Daniel's final days based on GPS mapping, environmental models, and behavioral psychology. The simulation confirmed one thing: Daniel had been moving, constantly, in a triangle-like pattern, as if trying to return to a central point. His movement suggests both fear and familiarity. He wasn't simply wandering. He was searching for the camp, for someone, for a way back. But time ran out. He had left a message, in pencil, in rocks, in silence. And now the forest had given it back. The forest was still, but the noise inside Claire Wexler's mind had never been louder. She returned to the clearing 1 week after the site had been closed off, accompanied by 2 rangers, a grief counselor, and a member of the forensic team. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Birds watched from the trees, motionless. Wind moved through the pines like breath. Claire stood at the center of the circle, where Daniel had once stood, drawn in desperation the word help, and closed her eyes. "He was here," she whispered, "right here." For 21 years she had played the moment over and over again, every possibility, every theory, every alternate timeline in which they had found him in time. But this wasn't theory anymore, this was proof, and proof is a double-edged sword. It brings clarity, and with it, pain. That night, Claire didn't sleep. She sat in her motel room in Bend, reading and rereading every legible page from Daniel's notebook. Day 2, got hungry. No food. Should have stayed by the trail. Can't hear the camp. Too quiet. The birds stop sometimes. That scares me. Going up. Maybe I'll see it from the top. I'm sorry if I made it worse. I love you. I'm trying. Each line was a dagger, but it wasn't just what Daniel had written. It was what he hadn't. There was no mention of panic, no angry outbursts, no rage against the unfairness of being left behind. Just the quiet, crushing sadness of a child trying to stay brave, even as the forest closed in. Daniel had spent his last days not in terror, but in hope. That realization devastated Claire more than anything else. The media coverage reached a fever pitch. National outlets picked up the story. Talk shows debated the ethics of outdoor camps. Podcasts speculated on the her Daniel referenced in Morse code. Documentarians arrived, eager to capture every possible angle. But Claire wasn't interested in angles. She was interested in truth. She requested a full panel analysis of Daniel's skeletal remains, which had still not been found. Only fragments of hair and clothing had been recovered. It was unclear whether wild animals had scattered the rest, or whether erosion, decay, and time had simply erased his physical presence. Still, a forensic anthropologist on site found a few small bones nearby, most likely from a foot or hand. DNA tests were underway. It would take months, maybe longer, but Claire already knew. "He's not here anymore," she told the sheriff. "I don't mean the bones. I mean him, his spirit. He's not stuck. He waited, and we missed it. But he waited, and that means something." Meanwhile, public interest in the case began to morph into something else: guilt. People from across the country, many who had followed the case over the years, began to write letters, hundreds of them. "I'm so sorry we didn't find him. I can't stop thinking about the rocks. I used to see his face on the missing posters. I'm ashamed I forgot." Some of these letters Claire read, some she didn't, but one line from a handwritten note stood out. "He believed someone would see the message. He believed in us. That's the part that breaks me." A memorial was planned. In October 2023, a gathering of over 300 people took place near the trailhead that once led to Camp Echo Pines. The camp no longer existed. Its cabins collapsed, its trails overgrown. But the energy of that place remained. Friends, former campers, local officials, and strangers stood together as a small wooden sign was unveiled. It read, "To Daniel Wexler, a boy who waited and never gave up. We see you now." A moment of silence followed, and then, in an act of quiet poetry, Claire stood and released a single red balloon into the trees, something she had done alone for 21 years. This time, she wasn't alone. The mystery of the girl in the forest, the her that Daniel referenced, remained unsolved. Some believed it was a hallucination, the mind of a dehydrated boy trying to make sense of the isolation. Others speculated it could have been a camper, a staff member, or even a predator hiding in plain sight. But there were no arrests, no indictments, no suspects, just questions, and the awful, echoing silence where answers should be. In the months that followed, Claire began writing again, something she hadn't done since Daniel vanished. A memoir, not about his disappearance, but about his life. "He was more than the boy who went missing," she said. "He was the boy who loved astronomy, who couldn't eat pancakes unless they were shaped like moons, who once wrote a poem about a leaf falling into a puddle that made me cry. That's who he was." The working title, "Still Trying," and the final chapter, a letter. "Dear Daniel, you didn't disappear. You were here the whole time, in the trees, in the sky, in the silence between footsteps. We just didn't know how to listen. But we hear you now. Love always, Mom." The notebook was archived in a climate-controlled case at the Oregon Missing Persons Archive. Alongside it, they placed a copy of one of Daniel's last entries. "If you find this, tell Mom I tried. I waited. I did everything right. And now, after all this time, someone finally had the chance to respond. In the years since his disappearance, Daniel Wexler had been a question no one could answer. But after the discovery in 2023, he became something else entirely. A legacy. Not of tragedy, though there was tragedy in abundance, but of resilience, of hope, of a child's ability to remain brave long after anyone would have expected him to. For Claire Wexler, that realization was a turning point. She had spent 21 years in a state of suspended animation. Her life halted in the shadow of that one missing puzzle piece. But now, even though not everything had been found, she had something she hadn't had before. A timeline, a message, proof that her son had not vanished into nothing. He had fought to be seen. She started traveling again, not to chase leads, but to speak. Claire became a reluctant advocate for the families of the missing, speaking at universities, conferences, and law enforcement workshops. "I don't speak because I found answers," she would say. "I speak because I learned how to live without them for 21 years, and how to hold on to hope that didn't have a face." She carried Daniel's notebook with her wherever she went, tucked into a weatherproof pouch. When asked why, she'd answer the same way. Because he believed it would be found. His message, written in the soil, spelled out in rocks, and hidden beneath moss and thyme, became a symbol. Foundations adopted it. Camp safety protocols were rewritten because of it. Drone usage in wilderness search and rescue operations increased by over 40% across the Pacific Northwest within a year of the rediscovery. And then there was the message board, still active. The original Reddit thread had become a memorial, filled with strangers who never met Daniel, sharing how his story had changed them. A hiker posted, "I now carry extra food, a whistle, and a flare every time I go out, because someone like Daniel might be waiting." A schoolteacher wrote, "I used to tell kids that being brave meant not being afraid. Now I tell them being brave means trying anyway, even when you're scared." But not all reflections were public. For some, the aftermath meant confronting their own roles in what had been missed. Evan Morales, Daniel's counselor, visited the clearing privately, escorted by 2 rangers. He hadn't spoken to anyone in over a decade about the case. Standing near the site of the help message, he broke down. "I thought I saw him going toward the crafts cabin," he said. "But maybe I was wrong. Maybe if I'd said something sooner, they would have looked in the right place." The ranger gently replied, "No one saw it, not from the ground." That's what haunted everyone the most. That Daniel had left a clear message, and for 2 decades it had gone unseen because it required an elevated view, a perspective no one had thought to take. Until the sky told the story. The forensic team continued their slow excavation of the area through the fall and winter of 2023. They found a second small notebook fragment in late November containing just one full sentence. "I think someone will see it if they fly." That sentence alone became a rallying cry. "Someone will see it" trended on social media, used by advocacy groups for missing children, hikers, environmentalists, and even pilots who volunteered their drones to scan other cold case areas. The Wexler case had become something larger, not a story with a simple ending, but a movement about visibility, about not giving up, about how easily someone can be lost when we look in the wrong direction. And yet, not every question had an answer. The identity of her, the figure Daniel referenced, remained a mystery. Analysts went back through grainy photographs, testimony, and old camp rosters, but the image was too faint, the memory too old. Some believe it was a hallucination. Others insist it was real. Claire had her own take. "I think her was a shape Daniel gave to his fear, or his hope, or both. Maybe he needed to believe someone was guiding him, even if no one was." As for Mitch, Daniel's father, his way of processing the discovery was quieter. After returning home to Arizona, he built a garden in Daniel's name. It wasn't large, but each stone was placed by hand, spelling the same word his son had left in the forest: help. Except here it stood not as a cry of desperation, but as a reminder to always pay attention. Daniel's childhood friend Kyle Harlow went on to compose a full album titled Sky Letters. The first track, Echo Pines, begins with the actual Morse code translation of Daniel's final message tapped out slowly over ambient music. The lyrics tell the story of a boy who looked up, believed in people he couldn't see, and kept spelling hope until someone finally listened. The final line of the song is simple: "He tried, so I'll keep trying too." The ripples continued. In 2024, Oregon passed new legislation requiring that all licensed camps with over 50 attendees install aerial surveillance protocols and submit updated GPS trail mapping annually. The law was unofficially known as Daniel's Act. By then, the forest had been designated a protected historical site. No construction would occur near the clearing. A small platform with a single plaque was built for visitors. No benches, no paths, just words etched into stone. "If you find this, tell Mom I tried." I waited. I did everything right. By spring of 2024, the last pieces of Daniel Wexler's story had settled like leaves on a still forest floor. His notebook, the rocks, the clearing, they had all been studied, documented, archived. The world knew now what had remained hidden for 21 years, but knowledge didn't erase pain. It simply gave it structure. Claire visited the forest one final time that April. The state had just completed construction of a narrow observation deck above the clearing, a small wooden platform suspended between two trees. It wasn't open to the public yet, but for her, an exception was made. She stood alone at dawn, wrapped in her son's old red hoodie. The sun hadn't quite risen, but the light was beginning to spill between the trees. Below her, the outline of the rocks could still be faintly seen through the foliage. She brought nothing with her, no flowers, no balloon, just silence, just breathe. And then, quietly, she said, "I saw it, Daniel. I saw what you made. I heard you." And for the first time in 2 decades, she let go. Not of Daniel, but of the ache that had kept her frozen in place for so long. She hadn't failed him. She hadn't given up, and neither had he. For Mitch, healing came slower. He had spent years trying to build a new life, marriage, career, distance, but the discovery forced him to reckon with the part of him that had never moved on. In therapy, he described it as an open loop in the brain that never stopped spinning. He returned to Oregon in May to meet with the foundation Daniel's Light, which now had over 70 volunteers across 4 states. He wasn't sure what to expect, but what he found was something his son would have loved. People quietly doing the work, not for praise, but because it mattered. They showed him hundreds of letters from other parents, not just about Daniel, but about their own missing children, the ones still lost, the ones never found, the ones who had messages too, maybe not in rocks, but in other forms, drawings, cries, broken routines. One letter read, "Your son didn't die waiting. He died trying." And that changes everything. Kyle Harlow, Daniel's childhood friend, donated all proceeds from his album to the foundation. His final concert, held in Portland's Crystal Ballroom, ended with a silent slideshow of drone footage from the clearing. The last image on screen was Daniel's name, spelled out in light across the trees, created with timed lanterns hung by volunteers. A digital message from above, a symbol that the sky was watching now. National Geographic approached Claire about a short documentary. She declined. Not because she didn't want people to know, but because she felt they already did. "This story isn't mine anymore," she told the producer. "It belongs to anyone who's ever looked up and waited to be seen." The final forensic report arrived in June 2024. Small bone fragments confirmed with 98.7% certainty to belong to Daniel Wexler. They were returned to his family and buried in a quiet cemetery overlooking the coast, next to a small bench with his name engraved in bronze. Claire didn't speak during the burial. She didn't have to. Everyone knew what she had carried. Everyone knew what she had kept alive. And now the world carried it with her. As for the her Daniel mentioned, the ghost, the girl, the voice, no definitive answer ever emerged. There was no woman caught on camera, no missing camper, no match to any criminal records. Some believed it was real. Others said it was metaphor, a hallucination born of fear and loneliness. Or maybe it was hope in disguise, taking the shape of someone to follow when the path ahead was too dark to walk alone. Whatever it was, it guided him to that clearing. And for that, Claire said, she was grateful. "I don't care if she was real," she once told a reporter. Whatever or whoever told him to go up that hill, to build that message, to write those words, saved him in the only way possible. They gave him a voice. In July 2024, the 22nd anniversary of Daniel's disappearance, Claire lit a candle, not in the forest, but in her own backyard. She didn't make the drive to Echo Pines. She didn't open the notebook. She didn't need to. She sat by her garden, looked up at the stars, and said just one thing: "Thank you for waiting." What does it mean to disappear? Is it to vanish without a trace? Or is it to leave a trace that no one sees until it's too late? Daniel Wexler didn't vanish. He was there, waiting, writing, signaling, not just with rocks and notes and Morse code, but with something far more powerful: belief. He believed someone would find the message. He believed the sky would tell the story. And eventually, it did. This story was never about a missing boy. Not really. It was about everything that happens after the silence. The lives paused, the voices unheard, the pain stretched over years like a shadow that never shrinks. But it was also about courage. Quiet courage, the kind that builds a signal out of stones, that holds on when the trail goes dark, that says, "I'm still here. Please see me." There will always be questions we cannot answer. Who was her? Why didn't the search team look farther? Could he have been saved? And maybe those questions matter. But maybe what matters more is that we're still asking, still listening, still looking up. Because Daniel's story reminds us that sometimes people are calling for help in ways we're not trained to see. That sometimes the most desperate messages are the ones we step over every day, too focused on the ground to ever look toward the sky. So, here's the question I leave you with. How many messages have we missed? Not just in forests, but in hallways, in bedrooms, in classrooms, online, at home. What if someone you know is spelling out help right now, in their own way, hoping someone finally sees it? Would you notice? Would you look closer? Because Daniel did everything right. He waited, he signaled, he believed, and it took us 21 years to hear him. Let's not take that long next time. If this story moved you, let it move you to action. Share it, talk about it, carry it. Because stories like this don't end, they echo. And the next time you're walking through silence or scrolling past a quiet face or dismissing something that feels off, stop, look up, and remember, someone might be waiting for you to see the message. This has been the story of Daniel Wexler. May we never forget that he tried, and that now, finally, we heard him.